Welcome to Magic.ai, the operating system for hospitality. At Magic, we know an operating system is more than just software and systems. It's about people, because hospitality is nothing without them. So supporting the hospitality community is our number one goal.
I think there needs to be more of a support system. Like, you have to love this business and you have to love every aspect of it, including sharing tribal knowledge on what is successful and also tribal knowledge of what is a failure.
Founded by lifelong experts, we're building the place where everyone in hospitality, from seasoned pros to first-timers, can gather, share, and grow together. Plus, we're crafting scalable tools and AI-supported software to boost your business. Dive into our vibrant community platform packed with meaningful conversations and robust tools and templates designed just for you. Need more? Our custom software solutions have got you covered. From recruiting and staffing to digital playbooks and dashboards, we're working on building a unique hub of resources unlike any other. Magic is your single point of origin for important conversations, accessible tools, valuable insights, and more. Join us at Magic.ai. The evolution of hospitality is here.
And it's really about not wanting to inflict that sort of intergenerational restaurant trauma onto my employees, and really being able to learn to control my rage. Always understanding empathy is the older sibling of performance.
Ben Shewry is an internationally renowned chef, restaurateur, husband, father, son, brother, friend, and creative obsessive. He tries to be direct, honest, respectful, loving, silly, resilient, and real. His CV includes owner of Attica and Melbourne's inner suburban Ripponlea, writer of 2 books, Origin in 2012 and Uses for Obsession in 2024.
Retention is one thing. We have people that have worked for us as long as 13 years, which is 50 years in an office. But the biggest one, and the way that I know that it's working, other than the general happiness in the workplace and the way that it feels when I go to work, the truly negative person brings everybody around them down. So this is talking about in a fair and equitable workplace, of course. In a workplace with a terrible culture, then there's going to be a lot of negativity. But in a fair and equitable workplace, it's about realizing that the individual is responsible for their own positive mental health. None of those things, decency, respect, fairness, good working conditions, none of those things should be exceptional in a restaurant. You know, that's just kind of like what it is. A bit weird to be not celebrated for those things, because those things are just basic human decency to me, but also absolutely seeing the world as bigger than the individual's needs and bigger than my needs, you know, and trying to always look for the long term in the future, well beyond the time that I will run Attica or be a chef even. You know, you want to kind of leave an imprint on the people that work with you of how they might go about it, you know, and they might take some of the things that you do and evolve them even further. So that's kind of, in part, it's kind of why I am the way I am. I also have an exceptionally guilty conscience. So, like, kind of doing the wrong thing for me is like an anaphylactic, you know, allergy. You know, like it's not that I'm not going to do the wrong thing. Like, I'm human. I'm super flawed. I'm far from perfect. But yeah, I just can't live with myself when I've fucked up. Really, you know, like, so I'll try to make it right. Yeah, but I'll definitely try not to make those.
A healthy dose of self-loathing in there.
Oh, yeah. No, I say all sorts of horrible things to myself internally, Matt, you know.
Yeah, same. I know that story. So I want to talk about your new book, Uses for Obsession. It's just about to come out. In fact, we feel super blessed because we get to kind of pull you into this foray right before it drops. I think it's coming out in just a few short weeks in the US, anyways.
October the 15th in America.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Huge deal.
Yeah.
You've got to be super stoked. Obviously you mentioned in our lead-in that writing has always been something that you're passionate about. I think that you were writing before you started cooking. And if that's right, I want to kind of understand how it felt to like get back and flex some of those muscles that you might not have had the opportunity to use typically, right? When you're in your restaurant.
Yeah, yeah, writing is a great, great passion. In the passions in my life, is obviously my family first. I have 3 teenage children and a wife, Kylie, who I run the restaurant with, who's the co-owner, and so that's kind of number one. And then from there, it's definitely the restaurant and food, and writing is right there as well. Really, writing and music, and the 3 things go in hand: cooking, writing, listening to music, and I've I think chefs kind of under intellectualize what they do a fair bit, like just generally. But if you think about the amount of writing that a chef will do in a lifetime, it's actually huge. Any chef, even chefs that don't consider themselves writers, writing recipes, is an amazing form of writing, and I consider writing recipes to be the most direct and honest form of writing that exists. If you think about it, like they're so succinct. They're just telling you exactly, getting to if they're a good recipe, trying to get to the heart of things. And so definitely I try to write in a lot of ways like a recipe writer. I mean, I want more color, more emotion, more perspective than a recipe, which can be very black and white. But we've all been writing for a long time as chefs. So I just like to kind of, acknowledge chefs and their actually excellent writing skills. Obviously, this book, it's not a cookbook. It's a conversation / memoir. And I've spent the last 2.5 to 3 years writing it and making it. And I would say that I probably spent the last 10 years really forming it and writing it in my mind, And so a current theme in the book is sort of, a human, me, sitting with discomfort at certain moments and not really being able to share those uncomfortable emotions, reactions, thoughts, injustices, experiences at the time because, when I was younger, I didn't really have the courage of my convictions. And kind of coming through, COVID and intense lockdowns, we had the world's longest lockdowns in Melbourne, nearly a whole year. I just kind of wanted to take the bullshit in my life. And a book was really the only safe place to write these things, to be able to have these conversations.
And it's a great world to be able to escape into as well when you're in a situation where you can't really do much, right? It's like it gives you this whole other kind of planetary, space to go and work out your ideas and dig in, That's cool. I love that.
So it's clear in the book that your experiences in the kitchen have given you, or you've developed this really wonderful framework. You touched on sort of philosophy of decency and good working conditions and treating employees well when it comes to running a kitchen. And where did that sort of start, or where did that come from? Was it experiences that you had when you were coming up in kitchens and you said, I don't really like how this is going. I want it to be different when I'm in charge? Or was it sort of like you were thrust into sort of you talk in the book about moving into the ownership role of Attica and the change that was in your career? Did you sort of start thinking about leadership at that time, or were you thinking about it ahead of that?
I mean, I've always felt like an outsider. That's probably kind of where that starts, and I write that I was an outsider in an outsider's world. So coming into kitchens and not fitting in because I wasn't a heavy smoker or a heavy drinker and I didn't do drugs, in certain kitchens that I worked in my earlier career, that was a really hard place to be. Because, I didn't get to go for a smoke break with the rest of the team because I wasn't a smoker, therefore I can't take a break. Just little things like that. And then always having been kind of a quieter person, an introvert, and being told many, many times that I would never lead a kitchen, that I didn't have what it takes, that I wasn't macho enough, I wasn't confident enough, I wasn't loud enough. And it's just kind of like funny thing to find yourself having gone through, 20 years of that or more, to sort of find yourself in this position of, finally be able to lead a team the way that you want to. And I don't look back on, I had a lot of positive experiences in my early career too, and not everybody was super tough, but I definitely had some harder moments, as most of us have had. And it's really about not wanting to inflict that sort of intergenerational restaurant trauma onto my employees, and really being able to learn to control my rage, and always understanding, and this is a core philosophy, that empathy is the older sibling, of performance. And I just couldn't believe that when I took the reins of the restaurant, I could own and control everything the way that I wanted to, that a restaurant couldn't be world-class, high performance, and a kind and lovely place to work. I just didn't want to believe that was the way it had to be for, let's say, a fine dining restaurant. And so I kind of, knew that we needed to do better and change and evolve. And so now in 2024, and for many, many years previous, there's no yelling, there's no swearing, there's no anger. There's only focus, and mistakes. We implore our team to bring mistakes to us, and we believe, though, that if we have an environment of fear, that they won't. Not even believe, we know that. So really having an empathetic workplace where people feel like they can speak up, and the sorts of things that we're starting to hear about more in the media now too, the things that we heard about the height of Me Too in America and more recently in Australia. Really, these are symptoms of people not feeling like they could speak up, not feeling like they'd be supported, not feeling like that they'd be believed, and of course, when you have really powerful people running kitchens and, staff worship famous chefs, rightly or wrongly, all this stuff can kind of get pushed under, and it's just so harmful to individuals who have survived it, and it's so harmful to all of us as a whole, because it forces people to leave. They have to find different professions, and none of that is acceptable to me on any level.
And your transition from chef to owner at Attica kind of really marked a pretty significant shift in your career, right? And I guess, I'd be curious about how you face that transition, because arguably there are a ton of people out there who aspire to become owners or, kind of captains of their own destiny in some fashion that maybe they aren't now. What was that like? And are there things to be considered on the journey that, people might not be thinking about?
It's a really great question, and I'll answer it really honestly. I've always viewed myself as a creative my entire life, whether that was in skateboarding or cooking or anything that I would do. And I really didn't think that it was my place to own a business, or that I ever would. So there's definitely a feeling of self-denial and of that you're not worthy, that running restaurants and owning restaurants is really best left up to the adults. And I think a lot of chefs and hospitality workers do feel like that. It wasn't until I was 38 that I owned my own restaurant, and it was terrifying to finally have that responsibility. And because it was something that I always wanted, but I just didn't have really the confidence to say it. And then, after working for the previous owner at Attica for a decade, I purchased the restaurant, and I just felt this enormous sense of responsibility. Finally, I have the reins. I need to change how things are, not only in our own restaurant, but the culture as a leader. But that came slowly. I couldn't say that, in 2015, one day I'm just a manager, and the next day I'm an owner, and the culture changed overnight. No, I think one of the things for listeners that's so important to understand about culture and building teams and changing is that it's actually just a series of small changes. It's not an enormous revolution necessarily, but if you keep working away at it and don't be overwhelmed by the problems, which largely, are a bit of a privilege to have problems, so it's just about working through them. I mean, problems will be there, whether you like it or not. You can complain about them, but realistically, you've just got to overcome them, and that's just going to be constant in business and in life. So for me, though, it's important not to feel overwhelmed by any huge situation you might be facing, but absolutely to not bury it. And, this is a philosophy that I apply to all things: relationships, business, cooking, whatever it might be. I just try to fix the problems in a timely way, thoroughly. I do my best. I never repeat my mistakes, actually. And most of the time, when I'm culpable in something, I'll just kind of own up to it immediately. It's super disarming. It enables me to apologize and to say sorry, and people appreciate that, and I always kind of know when I've messed up, I'm messing up less, I think, now at 47 than I would have at 38. But yeah, I just think, it's just easy to get overwhelmed. So it's just important to just know that fixing culture actually doesn't cost money. It actually costs effort, and it's on the leader. And crucially, to good culture, the leader must be practicing what they're asking for. If you're not prepared, if you just demand, then, without backing up with your actual physical actions, nothing's going to change, and people won't respect you.
So you've talked about a couple of qualities that seem like you believe make a great mentor or a leader. And are there, so things like doing what you're asking your team to do, being able to admit mistakes, creating an environment where people feel like they can come forward if they've made a mistake, and they won't be, punished or anything like that. Are there any other qualities that you think are essential for great leadership in a restaurant?
I think that the way that the business is set up and its governance from the beginning, from the get-go, is very, very crucial. I think the company has to be set up with a mindset which I would call holistic sustainability. And by that, I mean a really 360-degree approach to sustainability. And I don't just mean the selection of, let's say, seafood, and I don't just mean using all parts of the animal and trying not to waste food, and I don't just mean recycling, but I also mean, is the workplace fair and equitable for your employees? Mm-hmm. Are they working reasonable hours for reasonable pay? Are they rested? Are they happy in the workplace? Those are very crucial. And then finally, and never to be overlooked, is the company's engagement with the community. What does it stand for? What is it contributing that's larger than its own needs? And so by that, I mean, the community, of course, is the guests as well, the customers. How do they feel about the business? How does it treat them? But also, how are your neighbours being treated, and what can you contribute to make a better society, essentially? And somebody might hear me say that and think, well, I'm a tiny cafe in New Jersey, and I couldn't possibly change anything. But I would say that you're absolutely incorrect. You don't, respectfully, you don't actually understand the power that you hold as a hospitality business. And we have this immense gift that we can give people, but we can extend that beyond our customers. We can volunteer our time to causes. We can rally behind the things that we believe in and support them and advocate for change. And that's not just limited to an elite restaurant like Attica, because Attica was once the most humble restaurant in Australia, nearly. It had 4 employees. It sucked and nobody liked it. Nobody wanted to come. We were a truly terrible restaurant, And so we've come from, a long way back. I haven't come from money. I've got no fallback here. And I have privilege because I'm a well-known chef, but, I've worked really, really hard to foster and to protect the creative freedoms that our restaurant enjoys. And I really think that anybody can kind of work towards that. But the key is just not expecting it overnight. I'm a 19th year now at Attica.
Right.
So, don't be overwhelmed by what you can't do. Just kind of look positively at what you might be able to do. And that change could be really small. And it could be as simple as, in our workplace, a 4-day working week. And so all of our employees, every single one of them has 3 days off. They work between 38 and 45 hours, depending on their position of seniority. And I'm really proud of that. But again, I don't think it's something exceptional. I think it's something that is necessary so that our team can perform at a really high level. And if you're working 38 hours for me, I expect an elite 38 hours.
Yeah.
It's not only about kindness, it's not only about empathy. It's also about running a better business, a higher performing company, if that makes sense.
Right. So actually treating your employees better, or giving them more time to rest, or more access to mental health resources, for example, actually benefits the business in the long term. You're not just doing it because you're nice, which you seem to be lovely, but you're also doing it because it makes for a more sustainable business over time. And, I think everybody knows if employees stay longer, they're happier, they perform better, the company does better, the restaurant performs better, and then the guests can feel that. They can feel the eliteness of your team.
You're 100% correct. And I think the really big one is, retention is one thing. We have people that have worked for us as long as 13 years, which is, 50 years in an office. But the biggest one, and the way that I know that it's working, other than the general, happiness in the workplace and the way that it feels when I go to work, because it's kind of like also about how I feel about it too. It's not just about how the employee group feels. You kind of want to set it up for yourself in the way that feels good to you as well, because it should be dual benefit. It's not a one-way street, but but really the way that I know that this philosophy and this set of values, which has been in action at Attica for 8 years, works, is because sometimes I'll hear from a customer directly and they will go, "Oh my God, that was a great experience, the rest of the food, whatever, but your employees, oh my goodness, I've never met employees so engaged and so in touch and so believing in what they do." And that to me is a mark that, whilst we might do many things wrong, we are getting something right. And and you kind of want to be able to feed and grow that. And again, I would say that it shouldn't be something that's exceptional in restaurants, and it shouldn't be something that's looked upon as is impossible for somebody that's struggling. But it would be much easier if you set it up at the initial stages of building your business than trying to kind of change a restaurant where people are being overworked, or, there's got to be a way back for all kinds of restaurants. So I definitely encourage people, that maybe haven't set the restaurant up the right way to just think about, the things that we're discussing, and just know, even if you don't really care, like, that you're, if all you care about is performance and you don't really care about your employees, well, this is kind of good for both ends. I would do this regardless of whether I thought it was high performing, that's for sure. But it just so happens that this is about running a great restaurant, or actually in the way that I view it, a great small business. I don't judge my business through the lens of restaurants. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you've had to, it sounds like, really almost redesign kind of the playbook, if you will, for Attica, focusing on a lot of these things. And I'm curious as to what some of the most impactful changes are that you've implemented that have had lasting success. Like you talked about the 4-day work week as a great example of that. What are some others that you guys have just, come to the realization that like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we didn't do this earlier, or this has changed the game for us? Or have there been any of those kind of major moments for you?
Yeah, there's been so many. I would point to probably like one of the biggest cultural shifts many years ago. I think maybe 14 years ago, I saw this kind of classic problem that we all know in restaurants and cafes around the world, and that is this sort of rift between the front of house and the back of house, the kitchen and the chefs and the waiters. And
Global,
so this is
right?
an age-old problem. And no matter what I would do, I sort of felt like I couldn't kind of get those two sides to align. And what I understood it was that, in a restaurant you have two very different roles that require very different skill sets. You can be a total introvert in the kitchen, just muttering your shift or nodding your head. And in the front, you have to expend, as a waiter, you have to expend, so much social energy. And, I think both jobs are tough. As a chef, I think being a waiter is tougher. I just want to say that on a record. And, and I have, I probably have a high level of appreciation for waiters than I do for chefs. Sorry, chefs. But like, I just think that, being a waiter is such an art form. But so I knew this problem existed in my business where, because we didn't really know each other, the two sides, when conflict would happen, it would come to head in a fiery circumstance. And we all know this in restaurants, somebody picks up the wrong dish, puts it on the wrong table. Whose fault is that? Well, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. People are yelling at each other, and often chefs are yelling at waiters. And so I didn't like this because I'd come back. I didn't see this as high performance, and I saw this as kind of low level performance or behaviors. And so I knew that I knew that sort of empathy was a key tenet of performance already, because of how I lived my life largely. So I wanted to introduce something where we got to know each other. And we called it staff speeches. It still goes on weekly to this day. We have a roster. Every single employee in the business is on the roster. Every week it's somebody's turn to give a speech in front of their colleagues. There's no rules about what the speech could be about, anything at all.
Love that.
And we gather on a Wednesday at 4 p.m. and the person has the floor, and everybody who's working in the restaurant that day is in front of them, and they stand up and have to give a prepared speech. And what we hear about is, sometimes if somebody's willing or prepared to share something and be vulnerable, we hear some very hard stories. We've heard some incredible things, and it's not a dry eye in the house. We hear, somebody's deep passion for their football club, and maybe some prizes or trivia. So there's a lot of laughter. Maybe sometimes we hear it as simple as, I really absolutely love my cat. I live by myself. My cat's the biggest feature of my life. Here's some photos of my cat. This is what my cat means to me, right? It doesn't matter what it is. The idea is that those listening are gaining an understanding of that person's psychology beyond their ability to make a perfect sauce or perfectly polish a piece of cutlery. They're learning who they are as a human. And so therefore, later, after that person who loves cats has spoken, perhaps they're a waiter, they come out to the pastry kitchen, somebody that they don't interact with as much, and something goes wrong. Instead of the pastry chef yelling at the waiter, the pastry chef thinks potentially, I love cats too. I can see myself in that person a little bit. Therefore,
empathy. Yeah.
Empathy, exactly. And it's just such a simple mechanism. And it is an enormous part of our culture. And because of it, we have almost zero situations like that now. And I completely credit the idea or the philosophy of staff speeches as a way not only to improve the communication and performance of the restaurant in terms of a more connected team, but also as a mechanism to give an individual a voice. And I think, as hospitality workers, we can all remember times when we didn't feel like we mattered. We were part of a bigger team. We didn't get any positive feedback or even negative feedback. We just didn't feel like we mattered. And I'd never, ever wanted to create a workplace where the employees felt like numbers.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, giving somebody a voice in an environment typically which they go voiceless, right? I mean, that is
Yes.
really kind of the culture of hospitality in so many ways. It's always outward facing, and hospitality, the concept of it, we never consider it as professionals in the industry that it's actually something that needs to be used for ourselves as well, right? It goes
Great
both
point.
ways. And that's a really, really interesting concept. I want to pivot just for a second, a little bit, if we can, to mental health, because I know that it's a common thread throughout uses for obsession. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about it because I think it's obviously kind of a buzzy thing right now in the industry. But you were somebody who had been supporting mental health advocacy long before many others that I knew. And I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of how you personally manage stress and maintain a healthy work-life balance for yourself, but also how you support your team as they navigate those things.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I had a really hard time, mentally. I suffer from circumstantial depression I'm just about 14 years ago. And I suffered alone. I didn't tell anybody. And I thought I was the only person going through the issues that I was, which were, a breakdown in the relationship with the owner of the restaurant, working 90 hours a week, disconnection to my young family, things that lots of hospitality people can relate to. And it put me, and then the last part, and also crucial, was that was a very weak leader, and I'd overseen and allowed a sort of toxic negativity to grow in the workplace, with some people who were sort of problematic, and I found myself in this hole, and I didn't know, what to do or who to turn to for help. And eventually I met, I made a new friend, a muscle farmer, Lance Whiffen, and Lance talked to me in really open and honest terms about his life. And it was much tougher than mine. And hearing his story so brutally and honestly, it enabled me for the first moment in about 8 months to reflect upon my own and I guess in that moment I sort of learned, oh, geez, really, these things that you feel are so, insurmountable, really is upon you to change. That was kind of like the realization, only I can change. And so slowly I kind of got myself out of that hole, and, I describe it as, the clouds parting and just a little bit of light coming back. And one of the things, as I recovered, was that I was absolutely determined to never end up back there. And so, the sorts of protections that I put in place are probably the sorts of protections that also benefit a team. And that is, I won't tolerate negative attitude in the workplace. So I have a rule, no negative attitude. And I really define that. It's not toxic positivity. It's actually about toxic negativity, which if left unchecked is a killer in a business.
Yeah,
and it's also, and I absolutely want to be very clear, making a rule like no negative attitude means that you must clarify with your team that if something bad happens to you in this workplace, if you're harassed or abused or something doesn't feel right, then you must bring that forward. And that is not negativity. That's not okay. So we're really careful about that.
Right. It's not suppression of negativity.
No. It's about actually making a decision, though, to come to work and be positive, right? Like,
yes.
And it's a demand. Yes. It's not just a handshake thing, And if you are being negative, unnecessarily negative, then there's going to be a conversation had with you. That's just how it is, because the negative person, the truly negative person, and people lean into negativity, make no mistake, it's a battle that we all have to fight.
Yeah.
The truly negative person brings everybody around them down. And whatever their problem is, if it's not, and this is talking about, in a fair and equitable workplace. This is talking about in a fair and equitable workplace, of course. in a workplace with a terrible culture, then, there's going to be a lot of negativity. But in a fair and equitable workplace, it's about realizing that the individual is responsible for their own positive mental health. And of course, their workplace can play a role in that as well, beyond being fair and kind.
Mm-hmm.
And we do take the things that our team go through very seriously. And we're really proud, for example, as we certified as a B Corporation earlier this year, which was a huge achievement for us and something that would be angling for about 5 years. We really wanted to move beyond sort of any fake awards, and I kind of on some level think that all awards are fake. But I wanted to move past, any sort of bullshit sustainability initiatives and have a third party analyze our business. And one of the things that we did to get certified was to be able to provide an employee assistance program to our staff. And what that means is that whenever any of them are going through a hard time, they have free and immediate access to a psychologist or a counselor or a therapist, and so do all of their immediate family, their parents, their sisters, their partner. And so that was like that to me, just as an individual, is felt like one of the most meaningful things that we could do to support our people. Because I don't know how it is in America, but in Australia, certainly post-COVID, it's very, very, very tough to even just get a booking at with a psychologist, and it's very, very expensive. So, young hospitality workers, I would say, can't afford that. So, sort of we provide that for our team.
Wow. I think something that you said made me think when I was 18 or 19, and I was sort of at the end of my drinking and drug use, and it was just I was in a really negative. I've been sober for about 15 years, but my friend said to me, "Happiness is a choice. Every day you get to decide whether to be happy today." And I honestly thought she was speaking another language. Like it did not. I was like, that's an insane thing to say. Like that makes absolutely no sense. And 15 years later, I absolutely believe that, and it shows me how much growth there's been in my own internal life in 15 years. But I think about my friend. We were sitting on our dorm beds, and she said, "Happiness is a choice," and I was like, "Get it." Get the hell out. Like what a ridiculous thing to say.
I can imagine that being the reaction at 18, but that's also such a beautiful story, and congratulations on your sobriety.
Oh,
it's an enormous thing to overcome.
It's funny when, the positivity is a choice, happiness is a choice, negativity is a choice. I just think a lot of that is a foreign concept to a lot of people, and it was to me for a long time.
I think that kind of mindset is contagious as well, though. Like the positive mindset. I think we all know people, in our lives who kind of are that person, and so that it's really, I would keep coming back to my requirement to keep myself in peak mental shape, and able to be able to serve our team, and our customers. It's my responsibility as well, first and foremost, and to bring energy. So to your question about how I do stay, of a sound mind, I have incredible friends. They are a very diverse group of friends, and they are many, many friends outside of the restaurant industry. And I think to anybody who's a hospitality worker here listening, it is absolutely crucial that, as difficult as it can be to hold down normal relationships when you're working crazy hours, just try to have some friends that aren't chefs and waiters, is such a powerful thing, because they just have a different mindset. They're having a different experience of life. And often, hospitality lives can be echo chambers. We have a drink with our colleagues after work, and we sit around and talk about the day or whatever, or on our days off, we're meeting up with chefs because those are the only people who are off, or whatever it might be. But just, a range of perspectives and experiences as a human is so crucial to human happiness, and also to opening yourself up to things. And when we only look at the hospitality industry, which I should say I love more than any other industry, and I love what it provides for all of us. I do think that looking at other creatives, other occupations, and being around a variety of people is really important. And especially people from diverse backgrounds who are having a different experience of life than you. And I would always try to acknowledge that whenever I'm talking to the team, and I like to say it as like, we've all had to work extremely hard to get to this place, but some of us have had to work so much harder just to be at the same level. And by that, I mean, it hasn't been equal in life for all of us. And that's not, I'm not going to put that forward as an excuse, but just as I see you, I acknowledge you, and I'm proud of you because of what you've been through. Or what prejudices you might have faced in your life, they are not the same as what I've had to deal with.
Yep.
So I love that we're chatting with you tonight because, in morning where you are, but tonight because earlier today we chatted with Manu Bafara in Brazil, and she is a chef who really prioritizes working in her community and giving back in her community. And she really sees her role as a chef, as an educator. And I think she really harnesses the power of being a chef and owner in her community and is changing things. And I know you touched on that today as well. And I love that. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about Attica in your community, or how you see the role of Attica as improving the community in Melbourne or maybe elsewhere. It seems certainly like you are improving the lives of the people who work for you, but also I'd love to talk more about how the community fits into that.
Yeah. So Attica's particular interest, of those of you who don't know, is in the history of our country. And by that, I mean, we have the oldest living culture in the world, more than 65,000 years. So in Australia, Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander peoples were the first bakers, were the first farmers, were the first painters, were the first everything. And we're also an enormous island. So we don't have, we're not touching other countries. And because of that, we have quite a contained environment in some ways. And we have an enormous subset of native ingredients, endemic ingredients that only belong to this continent. Now, you might see them elsewhere, like in Hawaii with macadamia nuts, but they belong to Australia. California, you might see finger limes, they come from Australia, and on and on. Not only do we have fruits and nuts and plants, but we have many different animals. And so there's about 8,000 ingredients in Australia that exist only in Australia. And it makes it such an unique place to be a cook. And it's why, in my opinion, it's the most fascinating place to cook in the world, because the experience of cooking here is endless. And, we're only at the very beginning. And so not only are these foods here, though, there is this magnificent culture, the culture of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And this culture is so deep and interconnected, their cooking culture, their cuisine, that just makes you feel very small, like a speck of sand in the desert, I write. And learning about this culture in a small way and engaging with Aboriginal communities in particular in Australia has been life-changing. It's the most precious thing to me as a cook here, both as an inspiration and as, as friends, elders mentor us and teach us how to work with these foods, because there's this intergenerational ancient knowledge that's living, and that there's just things that you can't know if you've only been here for 25 years or even 250 years, like most of us have been here. Things that are passed down through generation to generation, ways of knowing interconnectedness with the land and the plants and the animals, that is profound. And for me, and this is maybe slightly insulting, but it's the closest thing that I've ever seen to a religion or experienced in myself as a religious experience. It's just undeniable. And so, but what's really crucial, and this is really, really crucial for chefs working in America as well, and I want to make this point as clearly and as strongly as I can, because America also has, its first culture as well, people that were here first before anybody else came. And
Yes.
you also have foods, and you also have traditions. And I've visited America a lot, and I don't want to be hypercritical of America, but I don't see great representation, and I don't see a lot of interest.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so America, what I'm saying is America faces similar issues. We have incredible inequality here with First Nations people, and it's just a very unfair situation. And it goes back, we don't need to get into the history of it, but let's just say it's horrendous. And so you tread carefully, but the point that I'm making, whether or not you're cooking in New Zealand or you're cooking in Denmark, or whether you're cooking in California, or whether you're cooking in Melbourne, when you're working with these indigenous foods, these endemic foods, you have to understand that there's people and culture attached to them. So they're not just a commodity. They're actually a part of our living history. And they hold knowledge and stories. And when you're very lucky, you might get to meet people whose culture that is and whose story that is. And if you're super lucky and super respectful, they might allow you to share that story. And so in our small way, even though our food is our personal expression of Australia, it's not Aboriginal food. We work with Aboriginal ingredients. But if we know something about a food or a technique that we've learned, then with permission, we would like to pass that on to our customer, because we can all grow in some very small, minute way the world that we want to inhabit. And restaurants are in the absolute prime position, to do this, because we are able to so frequently have a dialogue with the public. And food is this one tremendously disarming thing that we have. For all the differences that we have, generally, the one thing that we can least respectfully debate or agree upon is this delicious or not? And yourself, if you're a bit hungry and then you get a meal in your stomach, you feel better and you feel more generous and kinder towards the world. I certainly know I do. And so our role, just subtly, not as a social lecture, is to just point out some values and some things that we believe in and some things that we see in our community. Perhaps, the people sharing some of these stories with us don't have our privilege. And so, with respect and with permission, we will share that story. And we see people connecting to this in our dining room. And it's really kind of become a big part of the work for me. It's not the only part of the work, but it is important, I think, to sort of carry yourself in food responsibly.
I love it. Well, I've experienced it firsthand. I've been fortunate enough to have experienced it firsthand, and it goes down as one of the greatest culinary memories for me in my life. So thank you for sharing it.
Matt, thank you.
A steward of that culture and of those stories and that history, because it's incredibly moving and very important work. So thank you. So who is the one person that you hired that transformed your business?
There's so many people.
I'm sure.
I could say my wife, Kylie, and this is going to go on for more than a minute, but I should say my wife, Kylie.
I know, I was going to say, should we say?
It's kind of cheating, I think if I feel like she hasn't transformed my business or our business, then something's wrong. But I think it's really important to acknowledge, a couple of people, in particular Matt Boyle, who is our head chef and has been working for me for 12 years. He came from a football, sort of a aspiring professional football background, and found his team in the kitchen. He's a tremendous leader. He's very fair. He's kind. He doesn't have much ego. He's absolutely loyal to a fault. And I love working with him every day. And every extra year that we get together, and it won't be forever, but every extra year that we get together, I feel blessed. He's always got my back. And so I want to pay tribute to Matt Boyle. Thank you, Matty. Love you.
Lovely.
Awesome.
I love that. What's been the most successful marketing decision that you've made for your business?
To never use a PR company.
Yes.
No,
I love
let
it.
the stories be truthful. Tell your own stories. We live in a time where we are so fortunate to be able to have this direct to consumer conversation through the various social media platforms and podcasts like this. And so I really think, take it into your own hands, tell your own story in the way that you want to, warts and all. And don't buy too much into the amount of likes or comments or whatever you might get. Just try to tell the truth, be direct. Don't worry about reviews and awards. Those things, are largely meaningless. And if you get addicted to them like many people do, you'll only ever be disappointed, because whenever we put our faith in external sources over things that we can't control, it's always going to end badly. That's been my experience.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
True. Okay, the last one is, what is the one tool that you use every day? And it could be anything.
Well, it's got to be my hands. That's there's this memory in my 16 being at trade school, and my very, very strict Swiss tutor Beat saying to me, you must always protect your hands. To a chef, hands are everything. So that would be, it really is like that one tool that's just, I'm not sure if that was what you're looking for, but that's probably
great.
I'm very careful, very sensitive about my hands.
You talk in the book about hurting your right hand, and how challenging that was for you, and having to have surgery, right?
Yeah, I broke it in 3 places in it was the 5th or 3rd metacarpal. It was not a good time, and I was definitely not heeding my own advice there. I can be a little reckless with myself, I've got to say.
I wasn't trying to call you out. I meant like,
no, please,
you talk about it in
do.
Your book about how important your hands are. And
how sensitive they are. I don't like people like even touching them really. Like, I'm real funny about it.
No handshakes.
Oh, that's okay. But no stiff handshakes. That's how the hand was broken.
I can't believe that he squeezed your hand and broke it. I read that and I went, oh my gosh, that's insane.
In fairness, it was probably a very hairline fracture, and he finished it.
Yeah.
That's, my goodness. Well,
all right. So wait, one last question that we need to have answered that kind of has to do with nothing.
Oh, that's true.
What is your guilty pleasure for $20 or less? It could be, again, anything. Doesn't have to be food, but you've got to have some kind of guilty pleasure.
Can I tell you? I mean, it's super lame, but like right now, my weight has fluctuated much in my life. I've been 30 kilos heavier than I am today before, and it's been something that's really been hard to deal with. The way that I see myself in my body. And right now, because the book's coming out in 2 or 3 weeks, and I know there's going to be a lot of pressure, and I want to be in peak fitness in kind of all ways, and because I've spent 2 or 3 years writing it, and I've ignored my health a little bit, not my mental health, but my physical health, I'm on an incredibly, and I don't recommend this to anybody, I'm on an incredibly low calorie diet. And it's just that the best thing that I eat every day, and I'm salivating as I'm describing it, is essentially I take a non-stick fry pan, not like a proper non-stick, not a one that poisons you. I put the tiniest little spray of olive oil in it, like the tiniest. And then I crack a beautiful organic egg into the pan. I cook it slowly. I make a piece of rye toast. I sprinkle it with salt and pepper. I cook it slowly. It takes probably 5 or 6 minutes to cook. And then I put it on the toast. And it's honestly the best thing that I'm eating every day right now. There's nothing better. And so all I could think of was when you asked what's your guilty pleasure, is I just crave this egg because I'm eating mostly vegetables and no fats. And it's just like, it's a ridiculous thing, but that's what I'm loving.
I love it. I can crush eggs. Like I just love eggs more than anything.
We go through a lot of eggs in our house.
When we had, we don't have chickens right now, but when we did, it was just amazing the experience of going out and just gathering warm eggs and then cooking yourself a warm egg is like, it's otherworldly, right? It's like unbelievable.
Yeah. No,
okay, well, the book is Uses for Obsession. It comes out in a couple weeks here in the U.S. In fact, by the time this podcast goes live, it may be out there. So climb and clamor to your local bookshop to look for it. The author is Chef Ben Shewry, historian, humanist, advocate, punk rocker, skateboarder, cyclist, friend of mine, just one of the greatest all-time humans. I'm so glad that you joined us, Chef. Thank you. And while I have you, I want to thank you for sending me the Attica t-shirt, because I was relentless in harassing you. Ben has some of the greatest merch. I don't know who does your guys' merch, but it's fantastic. And it was this kind of like Metallica throwback Attica t-shirt.
Cool.
And I was like, Chef,
Right up
please
your
send
alley.
me one. Chef, please
Yeah.
send me one. And I've been that guy on the receiving end of that before, being like, oh my God, this guy just relax. Like, okay. But I love
never
it.
feel like that. Come on, we're mates. It's not a thing. No,
I
man,
love
you
it. I
gotta
wear it
give.
all the time. I'm actually not wearing it today because I wore it yesterday because I got our days confused. I thought I was talking
Oh,
yesterday.